Hello, dear folks. Welcome to the show. You dear fellow Americans, welcome to the show talking about our biggest issue, that is the 2016 election, general election. The beauty of democracy is that every 4 years you do such a big thing and then you just wait for the next term. Except during the time interval, if you have enough signature, you can outpost some you don't like, but that seldom happens. Anyway, the possibility is there. For the past 8 years, we see something going, so we first started with big word change, and later we were waiting for our eyes to see what has been changed so far. And the looks down the road so far will be in the next year and a half something in the presidency of the second term. We don't believe that we will see more. Right now we have a big list popped up on both sides of the both parties. So to get to the point, especially with the mystifying situation, mystifying talks, even including backfires from GOP itself, Donald Trump becomes the headline across the nation. So to get to the point, once again, I'm bringing my crying baby to my mentor, Mr. James Lee of Lee Strategy. Mr. James Lee holds a very, very high-profile background. Back in President Bush time, both Bush 41 and the 43, he was on the advisory board, the presidential on the advisory board, and also back in California, he was the spokesman of former California Governor Pete Wilson. And now he is running. He's a founder, he established himself, the G&E Strategy. It's a big firm on political advices. All right, so once again, James, welcome to the show.
Always good to be back.
All right, very good. As a matter of fact, I should have called you earlier because, I look at the last schedule. I thought, I should give you enough time to rest, right?
No problem.
And things are popping up so fast, especially for the past 2 or 3 weeks, though. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump has becoming the top of all the the headlines across nation. So, what's the nature of it?
Well, first of all, we have to remember this is August of 2015, mm-hmm. So we have a long way to go. And the thing to remember about Donald Trump, and to a lesser extent Bernie Sanders' sudden rise on the Democratic side, is that there's a very core constituency in both the Democratic and Republican parties who are, for lack of a better term, perennially disaffected and disenfranchised. Mm-hmm. In the Republican Party, that tends to be social conservatives and the Tea Party. In the Democratic side, that tends to be the progressive wing, environmentalists, and so forth. Mm-hmm. So both of those groups really have not been happy with the way things have gone for the past couple of years. Republicans, obviously, because they object to a lot of things that President Obama has done. And on the Democratic side, a lot of Democrats that object to the same things that President Obama has not done for them. So what you see in Donald Trump and his rise, which is about 22 to 25%, depending on which poll you look at, is that quarter group of disaffected, disenfranchised Republicans. And in Bernie Sanders' case, take the latest polling out of New Hampshire, where he went from only 7% to 44% in the span of 6 months against Hillary Clinton. That really shows the same level of disenchantment on the Democratic side with their choices. So I think you see in this early stage of jockeying, the most passionate voters are the ones who are the most upset. And they respond to the candidate who sounds really the most aggressive and the guy out there who really is throwing the firebombs. And right now that tends to be Donald Trump on the Republican side and Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side.
Well, what is most mystifying is the part that on one hand you see Donald Trump becoming the front runner so far, at least right now it is. Sure. He is. And on the other hand, you see the backfires even from GOP themselves, right? So what causes that to happen?
Well, again, if you look at the Republican side, you've got 17 candidates running. So there's an incredible amount of diversity on the Republican side. You've got a woman running, Carly Fiorina. You have an African American running, Dr. Ben Carson.
Ben Carson is
you've
one
got
of them,
several Hispanics running in Marco Rubio and Senator Ted Cruz. So there's a tremendous, and they're all fairly young, which is another primary difference. So what you find on the Republican side, I think, is there's going to be a significant feeling out period for Republican voters until they figure out, who is going to be their banner bearer. And I think also in the Republican Party, there are obviously a lot of different factions within the party in terms of, more libertarians that are interested in fiscal issues, Tea Party representatives, social conservatives, religious conservatives, and then more traditional, what we used to call the Rockefeller Republicans, and corporate interests and business interests. So it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out. What we do know is that on the Republican side, there are certain candidates that have an edge in fundraising, which has helped them organize early in this process, which has helped propel them. Obviously, Mr. Trump, in terms of him
Donald Trump belongs to that part.
Yeah, well, obviously, he's sitting on $10 billion of his own money, and he's already made a pledge not to take campaign contributions.
All right.
He's made significant hires in New Hampshire, for example. He's hired, some very, very top-flight Republican staff.
By 2 digits, yeah.
I would not be surprised, for example, if Donald Trump were to win New Hampshire. It's a kind of a quirky state. This is a state, for example, that did vote for Pat Buchanan. And so it's a state that tends to march to its own drummer. And I think that Donald Trump's independent streak resonates with those people in that state. However, I think Mr. Trump is going to have some difficulty as he moves through the primary process, where there's more normative mainstreaming in terms of the messaging.
I see. The syndrome is that I noticed. On one hand, you mentioned about the diverse situation of all the possible tendencies towards the 17 in your count. My count altogether 39, because they're just a name. There might be some just a name, right? So we see that. On the other, we see it is almost tilted, like Atlantic Light, like say, 2 digits leading as a front runner. So if it is the diverse, how come in his case he's so concentrated?
Well, like I said before, Donald Trump speaks to the frustration and anger and disappointment that a core group of Republicans feel about what's happened to the country, about what's happened with President Obama, and issues like ISIS, the Iran nuclear deal, the economy, wage growth, wage inequality, stagnation, and Russia and the Ukraine. There's a very long litany of things that a lot of Americans are really upset about. So I think Donald Trump, attracts a lot of the people who are disenfranchised on that sector. I really don't honestly believe that number is going to grow much larger than 25% for him.
During the past few weeks, especially during weekend, when friends get together, we mostly talk about the following fact: that the country is getting tired of having to go that way. We're going for almost 7 years, looking for a change. So far, we look into the Republican.
There's always lame duck status when you have a
president. And yet, with the Republican side, we see somebody who shows like a quote unquote buffoon kind of character, yet winning that kind of a support with the toll number shows which do not lie. My question is, does that put up a wrong portrait for the party?
No, I don't think so. Look, again, it's August.
It's August, right?
We got a whole year to get through this. And out of that 17, that number's going to get whittled down pretty darn quickly before we get into next year. I think anyone who calls Donald Trump, a clown or a train wreck and stuff like that misses the point. And the point is that there are a lot of Americans, not just Republicans, but Democrats, that aren't happy with the direction of the country. Donald Trump taps into that discontent. And let's be honest, too. The Republican primary debate that happened in Cleveland, there are 25 million people that tuned in for that. It was the highest rated debate that we've had ever on cable. I mean, it's more people than watch Game of Thrones or Sunday Night Football. And I think that that's a reflection of Donald Trump's ability to draw an audience in. And I think that helps the Republicans because there are a lot more people that are watching and listening to all these Republicans than normally would be, especially this far out from the election. And I think that kind of exposure and that kind of attention helps our candidates early on.
And also, the other part of concern is that we're talking about election of a president of the United States, the commander in chief of this great nation, the United States, right? We're not only talking about who's right, who's wrong. We're talking about a higher standard, including moral standards. Even we want to look into some kind of character that looks like a president, right?
Well,
and my people, my friends,
Yeah.
who are the average Joes, the Sues of Americans, they look at it that way. They do look at it that way. Oh, that guy looks like a president or something like that. He has that manner. He has kind of the attitude, so on and so forth.
Well, I mean, trying to decide, what's presidential. I mean, I've worked in several presidential campaigns before, and believe me, there is a big difference between what consultants think is presidential and what the American voter thinks is presidential.
Okay.
So I think that it's a little bit of a moving target, especially this early, because we're still trying to define people.
Sure.
And you have to think back too. I mean, if you go back to 2008 in the original campaign, Hillary Clinton was clearly the dominant frontrunner of the Democratic Party, and Barack Obama was barely even on the radar screen. By the time you get into Super Tuesday, Hillary Clinton is clearly out of the race, and Barack Obama's on the ascendancy. So you can't really tell a lot in the very early goings of these campaigns, because you're looking more for candidates who have the ability to raise money, the ability to build a campaign organization. That's why, in the early stages here, Governor Rick Perry of Texas, he's already stopped paying campaign staffers in certain states like South Carolina. That doesn't augur well for him. So you're looking for candidates who have the ability to put together a national campaign.
Now you have, we understand you're from your high-profile background, as you have involved yourself in several presidential elections, right? So do you think I would say word manner, put it in a simple term, the word manner is also a consideration to the public eye?
Well, I think again, what attracts people is a whole variety of different things in terms of presidential candidates. Some people respond, for example, to Senator Ron Paul and Rand Paul and his very libertarian message about tax reform and stuff like that. Other people who like Donald Trump may also like Chris Christie because of that combative, pugnacious, aggressive kind of attitude. It's very, very different. I mean, some may gravitate to Governor Kasich of Ohio because of the fact that he articulates a message about compassion, about opening up and changing how the Republican Party ought to treat things like illegal immigration and issues like that. So I think for every voter, the thing that's funny on the Republican side is that there's literally a candidate for every issue and a candidate for every attitude and a candidate for every personality.
Okay. All right.
So it's going to be interesting to see which candidate is going to be able to break out of their niche and be able to go beyond what they currently present. And I think that's going to be that sorting out process is actually going to happen fairly quickly.
All right. My dear audience, thank you very much, sir. My dear audience, today we are talking about our 2016 general election. It is, still premature, early stage, a very, very early stage. However, things are popping up a lot. On my side, I have 39 on the list from the Republican Party, and I have 20 on the Democratic Party, and then yet still early stage. To get to the point, to look into the future, what do we look at? What are we looking at? A picture of Democrats versus Republican, which means Democrats still have a chance, or it is simply a question of from among the Republicans, which means that the Democrats do not have a chance. So when we take a break, after we come back, we will still find out. Joining me is my good friend, a supporter, huge supporter of the community to American politics, Mr. James Lee, founder and CEO of Lee Strategy. and he's got a huge background with the federal politics. So stay with us. We'll be right back, please.